Matthew chapter 14. We are today going to be looking at verses 22 to 36 as we look at this account of Jesus walking on the water. When I was a kid, I distinctly remember a moment. I was pretty young. It was the late 70s. This moment where my parents packed up my brother and I, and the four of us went to the photographer for our studio pictures, And so here, if you can imagine, little Dave dressed up in his best 70s attire. I mean, I'm sure it was brown suede pants, brown suede vest, like a light blue or mustard yellow shirt, maybe a lot of paisleys. I'll bet it was awesome. And so here we are, the Brooks family at the photographer, and I was a little kid, so my attention span waned. I'm sure. I mean, it still wanes, but it waned. And so the photographer had this trick that he used to suck me back in. The photographer could detach his thumb. It was amazing. You know what I'm talking about? This little thing where he pulls off his thumb, like that little trick like that. And I don't know. To me, as a kid, that was mind-boggling. It's still attached in my brain. How did he detach his thumb? How did he do this? I was just mesmerized. Great pictures happened. We left, and that photographer in my mind would forever be known as the guy who could detach his thumb. That was just the coolest thing. Now, later on, I did find out it was a trick, and that lessened my awe just a little bit. But nevertheless, that was the one thing. Now, it's amazing. A party trick can amaze us for a moment, but a party trick doesn't really reveal who a person is. Just they can do a little cute little trick. Most people, when they think of Jesus and they think of a miracle, this is the one. This is the thing, walking on water. And this would be an amazing party trick if you could pull that off, right? I mean, everyone would be in awe. But here's the deal. Jesus didn't walk on water as a cool party trick. That's not why it's here. Why did he do it? Why did Jesus walk on water? And why does Matthew in his gospel include this account of Jesus walking on water? You see, Matthew isn't trying to amaze us. I mean, he's not just starting to go, wow, look at this. Isn't this cool? Look what Jesus can do. That's not what he's trying to do. What he's trying to do is tell us something about Jesus. You see, this miracle isn't just another thing. It exists to help us understand who Jesus really is. He isn't just another king. He is a king. He's not just a powerful king, although he is. He's not even just the king of Israel, although he is. Jesus is the God King of the entire world. He's God. That is the point of Jesus walking on water in unmistakable terms. In fact, in one verse, Matthew summarizes this at the very end of our passage in verse 33. He says, "And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, 'Truly you are the Son of God.'" Don't mistake it. That phrase, Son of God, is a divine title. And for the first time, the disciples recognized Jesus for who he really is. And that brings us to the one thing that I want you to remember today. I always try to give you one thing, and here it is. Jesus reveals himself as God by stepping into our fearful chaos and forming faith where fear once ruled. That's the point. Jesus steps in. He reveals himself as God, and he steps into our life, the fearful chaos of our life, and then he is going to form faith where that fear once ruled. All right, everything we're going to see in this passage today fits inside that one sentence. Now, I remind you every week when we talk about Matthew where we're at in this gospel. Matthew's purpose in writing this gospel was to reveal that Jesus is the king, the true king. Everything he writes fits into that paradigm, the kingship of Jesus. And now recently, over the last few weeks, Matthew has been showing us something crucial. Jesus is the undisputed king of this kingdom. He's been revealing the nature of the kingdom we've been in section 2 of Matthew for a very, very long time. And we're learning about the kingdom of heaven. And now he stops to reveal one more piece to us. That Jesus, the undisputed king, is actually God. So we're going to walk through the text. And as we read our text in Matthew 14, we're going to notice 4 threads that sort of weave all the way. So each thread I identify, really, I'm finding it everywhere in this text. And so I want to look at this together. So let's just read our text, all of it, together first. And then we'll observe some threads about the deity of Christ in here. Matthew 14, verse 22. Now, remember, Jesus just fed the 5,000, okay? And he's ready to go home. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now, when evening came, he was there alone, but the boat, by this time, was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Now, Peter answered him, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and he walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Our section continues 3 more verses. And when they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent around to all the regions and brought to him all who were sick, and implored him that they might only touch the fringe of his garment. And as many touched it were made well. Let's look at 4 threads that weave their way through this text. And the first thread really sets the tone for all the others, and that's Jesus reveals himself as God. Jesus reveals himself as God. I think this passage is placed right here in our text to reveal the glory of Jesus and to reveal the deity of Christ. He is God. The writers use narrative to teach us about Jesus. So the gospel writers don't simply state, "Hey everyone, just for the record, Jesus is God." They don't do that because they're using narrative as their tool. The closest we get to it is in John chapter 1, where John says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." But even that's a metaphor for Jesus. So we don't get a point where they're like, "Okay, here's the doctrinal statement, everyone. Jesus is God. Write this down." The gospel writers reveal it in the actions and the character of Jesus. And this section is no different. So Matthew is revealing this about Jesus. Now, in this section, in this account, Jesus puts his disciples in a boat and sends them across the Sea of Galilee. They're going home. And he goes up on a mountain to pray. Don't think Rocky Mountains, think big hill, okay? It's overlooking the Sea of Galilee. And he goes up there to pray, and the disciples are rowing. They're probably rowing because the wind was against them, and so there was no sail involved. And they're rowing and struggling, and these guys are struggling. The text tells us it was the 4th watch of the night. That's 3 a.m. They are on the lake at 3 a.m., fighting a storm. And Jesus comes to these tired, scared disciples, and he's walking on water. Now, I want you to notice some details here in this account that help us to see that this is about showing us the divinity, the deity of Jesus. First of all, Jesus walks on the sea. Why does Jesus walk on the sea? Why doesn't he fly to them like Superman? I mean, he could. Why didn't he conjure up a jet ski or paddle to him in a boat? Why does Jesus walk on water? Why? Because Matthew is highlighting Jesus' deity. This is an Old Testament reference, and you have to see this here. In Job chapter 9, verse 8, Job says something about God Almighty. He says this. I'll put it on the screen here for you. He alone stretches out the heavens and walks on the waves of the sea. What does God do, according to Job? He walks on water. That's how powerful it is. He is in control of the entire creation such that he can walk on top of waves. He can tread on them. They're like solid ground to him. In the original language, Matthew's phrase almost perfectly reflects the language of his Bible. It's like almost like Jesus is grabbing the words right out of Job. This is the God of Job chapter 9. So even just the act of Jesus walking on water is revealing, he's revealing that he is God. But then it gets more explicit. Like just in case you missed it, he comes to them on the water, sees they're afraid, and what does he say? He says, "It is I." I mean, do you see that? He says it right in verse 27. Jesus spoke to them saying, "Take heart, it is I." Okay, so this is not just Jesus going, "Hey guys, hey, don't be afraid, it's me, Jesus, I'm your friend. Like, it's okay, I'm not a ghost, it's all right." That is not what he is doing. Jesus is saying in unmistakable terms a reference to Exodus chapter 3. His words are the same words that are spoken in Exodus chapter 3. Moses comes to a burning bush. God's got a mission for Moses. And Moses says, "Well, I'm going to go to the Israelites and they're not going to believe me because I don't even know your name, God. What's your name?" And God gives him his personal name, Yahweh in Hebrew, which is I am. It's a verb. I am. When that got translated into Greek, the translators translated it ego eimi. Same thing. Yahweh. Jesus says, "Don't be afraid. Yahweh." The disciples got this. They had to. I mean, it was so stark and obvious in the text to them. Like they would have known that account in Exodus 3 by heart. We have certain things like that in our life. If I say a certain quote, like if I said, "Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore," you'd go, "Yeah, Wizard of Oz," right? If I said, "Luke, I am your father," you would say Star Wars Episode 5. And if you're a real nerd, you'd go, "That's not the exact quote, Dave." Okay, whatever. You know what I'm talking about when I say that quote. When he said, "I am," it is I, Yahweh. They knew exactly what he was talking about. Matthew's readers knew what Jesus was saying. If it wasn't explicit enough at that point, now it is. And even though Peter recognizes this, do you see his response? Peter's walking on the water, or Jesus is walking on the water, and Peter in verse 28 says, "Lord, if it's you," really, this isn't Jesus. Maybe you're a ghost, maybe you're Jesus, I don't know, but if it is you, let's check it out. No. If you're the I am, then you not only should walk on water, tread on the waves like Job 9 says, but you should be able to make me do it. So, can I do this too? You see, even his question is a question of identity. You say you're God. Are you really God? Is that really you? And then we end in verse 33. All the disciples got it all. What do they say? Truly. I mean, they worship him. First time it says they worship him. They worship him. Truly you are the Son of God. You see, Jesus reveals himself as God, and it runs all through the text. Now, if you're here today, my guess is that you know something about Jesus. Like you're in a church, it's probably not a surprise to you that I would say Jesus is God. We sing worship songs to him. So like this shouldn't be a shocking revelation to you. But the deity of Christ is of the utmost importance. And in the next 3 threads, I want to show you how this deity the deity of Christ works itself out in the lives of his disciples. And that takes us to our second thread, really. See, Jesus comes near. The divine Jesus comes near to fearful people. He's God, and he comes near. One would expect God, I think, if we just think about God in just general terms, one would expect God to stay far from people. I mean, just even in social ladder stuff, God's way up here, and we're peons, right? He's like perfectly holy, and we are clearly not. And like we would think God would go, yeah, I'm staying far from this hot mess. I'm God. I'm like way too good for that. He doesn't. He comes down. He comes near. And he comes near to us, the hurting and fearful. And he does this in 2 ways in our text. First of all, he comes near in proximity, just physical nearness. Look at the word came. I just highlighted all the word come or came in our text. It's really interesting. Verse 26, in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them. Verse 29, he tells Peter, come to me. And he came to Jesus. I mean, like, he comes to them. He says, Peter, come close to me. Peter wants to come close to him. There's this nearness of proximity. God is not far off. He's near. And then later, when Peter is sinking in the water, what does Jesus do? He reaches out his hand. You can't get nearer than that. He reaches out and pulls him up. You see, Jesus is close in proximity to fearful people. He comes close to those he loves, to those who are hurting. You see, not only does he draw near in proximity, though, like he also makes physical contact. That's striking to me in this text. I mean, he comes near and he touches people. So when Peter is sinking, what does he do? He takes hold of his hand. There's a physical touch there. Later on in the last section of our text, after this incident's over and he's out and people are coming to him and they say, can't we just touch your garment to be healed? And he lets it happen. And they're all healed. There's physical contact. You see, Jesus comes near to hurting and fearful people. Now, and that takes us to really our third thread. I mean, he's God. He doesn't stay far off. He comes near to the hurting and fearful, and then he transforms that fear into faith. So the disciples are afraid. I mean, Jesus comes to them, and there's just fear all over this text. Look with me. Verse 26. They see him walking on the water, and they were terrified. They cried out in fear. Peter was afraid, verse 30, and that fear turned into doubt, verse 31. Like, there's just, the disciples are afraid, Peter's afraid, everybody's afraid. And Jesus is going to transform that fear into faith. He says, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. Those are the words that God speaks. You know, that phrase is all over the Old Testament. I mean, to Abraham, God said, do not be afraid. To the Israelites at the edge of the Red Sea, when the Egyptians are going to come down upon them, he says, do not be afraid. To Joshua, who's ready to take leadership of an entire nation, he says, do not be afraid. To his people that are about to head into exile, he says, don't be afraid. And to Daniel, who is facing a den of lions, he says, do not be afraid. These are the repeated words of God. And the God King Jesus meets his fearful disciples and says to them, do not be afraid. God's people, something we still need to hear today. Because we're a fearful people. Sometimes I think fear is just part of the human condition. We fear the loss of control. We fear what might happen to our kids. We fear broken relationships. We fear physical safety. We fear financial collapse. We fear being publicly shamed. We fear being alone. We have 100 other fears that I don't even know how to name. Fear makes us doubt. It's just what it does. We think, well, maybe Jesus isn't good. Maybe he's not real. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe I am on my own. Maybe. Fear makes us say maybe. Peter doubted and started to sink. And Jesus says that the answer to this is faith. Oh, you of little faith. I'm God. Do not be afraid. Transform your fear into faith. You see, fear and doubt are part of the human condition. And if you're fearful, I just have good news for you today. The divine King who came to us, he meets us in our fear and doubt. He says, take heart. He doesn't shame Peter. He says, take heart. It's me. I'm God. I'm with you, and that is a good thing. And we see the disciples with Jesus' slow, patient, deliberate approach to them. We see that he has been, since the opening pages of the book of Matthew, he has been transforming his disciples. He's been transforming them. So, do you remember another time in Matthew when the disciples are on a boat? Matthew chapter 8, they're on a boat and there's a storm. Jesus is asleep. Do you remember this? He's asleep in the bow and they're like, Jesus, you clearly don't care. You're sleeping through the storm. And what does Jesus do? He stands up, wakes up, and he speaks a word and he calms the sea. He calms the storm. Now, I want you to hear what the disciples say. In fact, I'll put it on the screen for you here. Their response to this is, what sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? Jesus in chapter 8 is called a man by his disciples. I mean, he is a man. Oh, but he's so much more. By chapter 14, now the disciples worship him as the Son of God. Do you see the growth? Do you see the patient approach of Jesus with them? He's transforming their fears into faith, and I'm so thankful that he's patient with me, a guy who is afraid of some really dumb stuff sometimes. Just am. I appreciate that he's patient with me. He's changing me. I think the longer I live, the more experience I have with Jesus and the more I trust him. I don't know, can you relate? He transforms fear into faith. And that takes us to our fourth and last thread. And this is really the big finale here. Jesus is sovereign over our lives. If he's God, he comes near to us and he transforms our fear into faith because he is sovereign over our lives. As God, it goes without saying, but I think we forget this. So in this passage, I want you to notice how the divine sovereignty of Jesus is fully on display. First of all, he has control over the elements. Just like in chapter 8 where he calmed the storm, he does that. He can control the buoyancy of the water so that he stays on top of it. He can control the weather. The storm stops. John tells us the boat was immediately at the other side of the shore in this account. He has got control over all the physical elements around us because he's sovereign. It reminds me of Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. In Genesis 1:1, you might have heard it before. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now it goes on. Now the earth was formless and void, without structure. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the deep. Genesis goes on to show us over 6 days how God takes an unstructured, chaotic environment and brings order and structure in this beautiful ways. Over 6 days of creation, God transforms, that creates everything that we see in this beautiful world. The Spirit of God is hovering over the surface of the water, bringing order to chaos because that's what God does. Jesus here is doing what God does. He's hovering over the surface of the water, bringing order to chaos. His sovereignty is on full display. He is sovereign over this world. Also, he is sovereign over our lives. He's sovereign over the circumstances of our lives. In this text, there are 3 uses of the word immediately. Now, immediately is an interesting word only because Matthew doesn't really use it that much. If you flip over to the Gospel of Mark, man, that guy uses immediately like it's every other word. He's in a hurry. Everything is immediate in the Gospel of Mark. Matthew rarely uses the word immediately. And here we see 3 uses in this text. And they all show something that Jesus did, something that he initiated. Look at this, first of all, in verse 22. Immediately, it's the first word in our passage. Immediately, what did he do? He made the disciples get in the boat. Wait a minute. Jesus knew a storm was coming. Jesus knows this is going to take a while. They're going to be rowing hard. They're going to be fearful for their life. Jesus didn't just go, okay, I'll let you go. He went, you're going. He made them. Some of you are bristling right now because you're like, no one's going to make me do anything. He made them. Wow. The next immediately, verse 27. He comes to them walking on the water, and immediately he spoke to them. He didn't wait. He didn't go, I'm going to let them sweat this one out a little bit. I'm going to just let them think I'm a ghost for a while. This should be fun. No. He immediately speaks. Because that's what God does. He speaks. Speaks into their lives. And he speaks a voice of comfort. Take heart. So he made him get in the boat, and then he meets them and speaks to them words of comfort. And then the last immediately, verse 31. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of Peter. Again, I'm going to let Peter sweat this one out a little bit. I wonder how low he can go before like I rescue him and pull him out. No, it's immediate. Jesus sees it. And in his sovereignty, he rescues Peter. But it's a rub. We don't like that Jesus sent him into the storm. Why did he do this? Well, because he's sovereign. And his disciples submitted to that. As we close, this is really what I want you to take from here today. I want you to walk out of here committing yourself to submit to the sovereignty of Jesus because he's good. If we believe that Jesus is God, then the only faithful response to this is to submit to his sovereignty. He is sovereign over your lives. He's not reacting. He's orchestrating for his good. And this is the key. His sovereignty is not only for his glory. He's not sovereign just about him, although it is about his glory. Let that be unmistaken. He is glorified in his sovereignty. But also for our good. Okay, I talked about Genesis 1:1. Even his sovereignty is on display in the very first two verses of Genesis, right? Genesis 1. He's sovereign over all creation. You know how Genesis ends? Chapter 50. Joseph went down to Egypt. I mean, he's treated terribly. It's awful. His brothers sell him down there. Everything goes wrong and bad. He ends up as number 2 guy in charge of the whole country. His brothers come down to him, and at the end, they're groveling. They're like, oh, what if dad dies? And he just sort of, says, never mind, I'm going to get rid of you now. Never mind, I'm just kidding, I don't forgive you. Right? So his brothers come to him groveling, saying, hey, Dad told us you had to forgive us still. And Joseph says, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. God takes the evil, awful messes, and he's not afraid to send us into them because he's sovereign. And he does it for our good and for his glory. Are not the disciples better because they went into the storm? They now experientially know who Jesus is. They worship him as God. They are better off. If Jesus had just said, hey, take out your notebooks, it's time for lecture number 5, I'm God. And for an hour he lectured them on his, right? No. They experienced it. They don't just know it here, they know it here. And they're better for it. They're in a better place. Because the sovereignty of Jesus is always good. It's always good for us. Even when the worst happens. Even in the pain. Even in the hardest thing. The sovereignty of God is good. You see, God doesn't deny the reality of evil. He overrules it. So the question of Matthew 14, why did Jesus send his disciples into the storm? That's for his glory and their good. And that's the hardest truth. I think the hardest part of this passage is the first part. He made them get in the boat. It's the hardest one for me, the whole thing. Walking on water, that's all. I got it. He made them get in the boat. The hard truth is this. The safest place to be in life may also be the scariest. Because the safest place is submission to the sovereignty of God. That means you're out of control, and he's in control. Obedience in the face of our fears is tough. just tough. But will you get in the boat? He wants you to trust him more. Some of you are here today and you are resisting the sovereignty of Jesus. He says, get in the boat. And you're like, nope. Jesus, you come with me. I got a better idea. You come with me instead. I'm going to do what I want, and you just stay here right in my pocket, so I got you if I need you. And Jesus says the opposite. Actually, I'm going to put you in the boat, and I'm going to send you. Some of you don't like that. I don't like that. Oh, but I want to like it more. See, Jesus doesn't follow us into self-rule. He invites us into trust. And here's the good news. Just like his disciples, Jesus is patient with me, patient with Dave Brooks, and he's patient with you. And all of your fear, and all of your resistance. He is sovereignly working in your life, and he's calling you again, get into the boat. See, Jesus reveals himself as God by stepping into our fearful chaos and forming faith where fear once ruled. He's a sovereign king. Will you trust him? Heavenly Father, help us by the power of your Spirit. Help us to revel in the sovereignty of Jesus, to trust him more in the face of all our fears, to believe that you are working things for our good and your glory, and to trust you. Form our fear into faith. In Jesus' name, amen. Would you stand as we close?